Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, verify compliance with open meetings law notification, and adopt the agenda. If you all stand with me to the pledge of the flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next is recognition, staff and student spotlight. First is Scott Jaquish for the Greenfield Park and Recreation Director.
Oh, sure.
Front and center. We're going to give this to you first.
Okay.
Over here, and then Nancy's going to say something, we'll take a picture.
It's like
Okay.
Christmas. It's like
Yes.
Go the other
Okay. So, I've known Scott for the 11 years that I've been the Whitnall representative on the Park and Recreation Board. And Scott has been the director of the Park and Recreation Board, or the department, in Greenfield since 2000. Before that, he was a member of the staff, but he was the director since 2000. Scott and his staff, a very small staff of 4 or 5 people, do an amazing job in Greenfield. They take care of everything, and all the parks and everything. They do all the recreation programs. They do a lot for Whitnall. They work with Whitnall a lot. And so I was very pleased to be able to attend the award banquet that Scott received the award. So he received the highest honor from the Wisconsin Park and Recreation Association. He received the Professional Award of Merit. Scott has received many other awards from this association, but he received the highest award this year. So, Scott, thank you for that. Token of appreciation, and we'd like you to open it.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, boy. I'm gonna say this is good use of tape, that's for sure. Oh, boy.
Styrofoam.
Oh. Oh, wow.
Falcon boas. There you go. Yes, like where your phone will take a picture. Oh, sure. And you got little cheese tools in here too, so. Just so you have your Holly parties. Yeah. Oh, wait, no.
I want to take this to the office.
Yes, you know, all these little tools. There you go. Are you ready? Thank you.
Oh, looks beautiful.
Okay. Thank you.
And no parts left over, that's even Just quickly, thank you very much, I really appreciate that. Obviously, awards such as the Professional Award of Merit is not something that anybody really goes into the field looking at, okay, eventually someday. But I've been very fortunate over all those years, having a great staff to work with. And then extending beyond that, working with the Common Council, and of course, both school boards have been great over all my tenure there, for the use of facilities, and working back and forth on a lot of collaborative efforts over all those years. So again, thank you all very much. You guys are just as much as part of that award as anybody else, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Joe Hausch for We're All In.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we need to, Joe came earlier this year, yeah? When we talked about this, we did our big kickoff, and Joe has been sharing with us, but most of you may know, may not know, but Joe is an integral part in our, when we came up with our new tagline that hopefully you see all over. And Joe had sort of used that, and we said, hey, it sort of fits when the board did a retreat this summer and really looked at what it was that the community said that we're all about. And so in working with him and saying, hey, I think we want to make this who we are and what we're about and that. And Joe continues to be involved in saying, what can we do next? In fact, I always have to keep up with his emails, which I'm behind on right now because he has got a lot of good ideas on how we can continue to take that and move that forward. So, and we will. So we are just at the beginning stages of that and continue to want to ask him as a parent and community member how we can take that campaign. So you also are going to have to open up this publicly because yours is a little bit different.
I get the Falcon-shaped cheese.
There you go. You have to have a part of it. This is for you, and I'm going to have you open this up publicly, see if you can do it as well as Scott did.
Should we be tiny?
Maybe.
Equally good tape job. I've seen this.
Have you? Wow.
Yeah. Knocks the microphone open. All right. Big reveal.
Yeah, big reveal.
Ooh. I recognize.
Did
this
you?
too.
You recognize
I
that a
recognize
little bit?
this.
Yeah.
That's very nice.
So Joe's is a little bit different. His has the "We're all in" on his, and so.
Very nice.
Okay, wait. He says I have.
Yeah.
Sharon, did you get that? I did. Okay.
I suppose I have to say something too, right? So I've been doing this branding and marketing and advertising stuff for about 35 years. And I've developed a lot of these campaigns. And maybe none so natural as this one. And it's all inspired by my wife, my family, and all you guys. And people who volunteer for youth sports. And Twitter all weekend when they could be doing other things.
Absolutely.
At sporting events. But it was very, very easy and natural, and I hope we can continue it because I think it could affect this whole community for long beyond when I'm going to be around. So hopefully we all jump on board and we're all in. I am. So, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Just to let you know, both of the designs on both of those were done by our middle school makerspace teachers. So those were done in-house in terms of that. So I should note that also. So.
Great. Thank you both. On to the Whitnall High School Student Council report. So we actually don't have students today, as you can see, but the advisors are going to speak today, give us an overview of their vision going forward, their thoughts on it, and then look for our feedback on what we see the future of student council.
It was up there. I think you just pulled the thing out a little bit. Do something somewhere. It was good.
Andrew, you're embarrassing.
There we go.
School.
There it goes.
There we go.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been a couple weeks since student council as a group of kids were able to meet with the Thanksgiving break we had and a faculty meeting. So in lieu of the kids coming and presenting, Jonathan asked that Jesse and I come and present just some of our ideas as advisors from student council, some of the things that we're seeing that are good right now with student council and like our vision and direction for the future and possibly some things that we'd like to get administration and the school board a little bit more engaged in.
Can you mention your names for the folks that don't know you?
Yeah, I'm Andrew Bauman. I'm a high school teacher at Whitnall High School.
I'm Jessie Tassiv. I also happen to teach at Whitnall High School.
Good.
Yeah.
Sure. So one of the things that we've been working on for quite some time is how do we change the perception of student council and the kids as just a party planning committee? Like, oh, you just plan 2 dances every year and that's about all you do. Which, when I came on board with student council 8 years ago or so, yeah, that's pretty much all we did. We planned a couple dances. We did some stuff with some soda cans during Valentine's Day, and that was really about it. So I think that over the last couple of years, especially with Jesse coming on board, we've done a lot to increase what we do beyond just party planning. Our Whitnall Gives Back Week that we did in the spring, I think, is a really good example of that, where there's some parties involved in that for sure, but I think what we gave back to both the community of Whitnall and the greater community of Milwaukee was far greater than planning a dance.
Yeah, and really shifting kids' focus away from what would be fun for us to what's going to be better for everyone as a whole. So I wasn't around here 8 years ago because I was 19. But I just like to throw that in for Andrew there. But I really think that we're starting to make that shift where the kids are starting to think about, well, last year, if we did the hurricane fundraising, what about this year, like looking towards these other things that might be relevant. So we've had some questions about that, and I think that they're really starting to think kind of beyond our walls.
The next thing really is more the focus on the kids that we're trying to get, and that's going to be the future slide. Deals with how do we as advisors in student council, especially as a student government, take the step back, not solve all the problems necessarily, let the kids solve a lot of the problems. So making sure that we're meeting as frequently as we possibly can. Students as the executive board setting a lot of the agendas is really what we're really hoping to guide them toward. So that it's not a student council run by teachers, it's a student council facilitated by a couple teachers. One of the big things that we're looking to do currently, and we're kind of in the middle stages of this, is getting the students together in coordination with student council to help student council better understand what the feelings, concerns, perceptions about the high school kids are. Like, how do we get student council to kind of be that ear for the kids and do it in a way that's really uniquely on the students rather than something that's kind of just generated by us or generated by Mr. Tollefson. How do we get the kids to feel like the kids who are in these leadership positions are listening?
For sure. One of the things that we're looking at specifically, our president just drafted an email that will go out to the student body where we're going to have once a month. It will be called an open student council meeting, so any kid can come, and we'll have in the email to the students, here's what we will be discussing. If you have opinions or ideas about these things, come with those ideas, so that if it's, they're also working on some surveys as well to gather student feedback, but that way if it's not necessarily something that they could just click on a Google form, or if they're not really sure for an outlet, and that way they can see too that it's not being distorted. This is what we talked about, this is what I'm telling you, that is the truth, so that there's nowhere along the line where, it started with, how about the color blue, and it turned into, and then Mr. Bauman punched a hole in the wall, where these crazy things get warped from the teenagers. So just trying to add some more transparency and some more opportunities for kids who maybe don't want to be involved year round, but, want to have a say in something that's going on.
So future stuff, things that we really would like to see student council become beyond the things that we already do, and we've got a timeline that we'll share with you of some of the larger things that we're doing as we go throughout the rest of the school year. Number one is enhance the communication between students, staff, and administration, and I think that goes beyond just the administration in the main office. I think there's a level of communication that either student council or just all of the students should have with the school board too. And I think Jesse and I would look for some feedback and some suggestions on how we could get student council to help with that. How do we get our student body to become more self-sufficient? So our student government sometimes feels like it's run by two and then kind of implemented by the kids, and how do we turn that around a little bit? How do we get the kids to really be motivated to be some change at the school here?
Last, we're hoping that we can be a source for the students, if we aren't already, of positivity and respect. Teenagers get very emotional sometimes, and we've had, just some weeks or days where it just feels like the students are just in this pit that we don't necessarily know how to get them out of, and so we're hoping that we can be a place for the students and an example for the students. We've talked a lot with our kids in the last 2 years about what we expect from them as an example to their peers, that, as being a part of this organization, you are agreeing to certain things, including, it doesn't mean that you can't ever be angry about things. It doesn't mean that you can't have opinions about how things should change, but you need to work to be part of the solution and not someone who just perpetuates anger or, works to the anti-spirit day for the spirit day or things like that. So hoping to move, in that direction where the kids see themselves as that example as well, so that it doesn't have to be a conversation from us. It can be something that's passed down from upperclassmen to those lowerclassmen, and they just understand going forward, this is my responsibility.
So with that said, we want to just go through the timeline of some of the larger events that we're doing in the student council. I think, one, to know what's coming up, but two, the kids who come into the school board in the future talk about some of that stuff that we just presented, rather than kind of giving a recap of some of the things that we're doing. I think on the school board level, it's nice to know what the kids are doing and what the student council's planned, but maybe having a little bit more conversation around their engagement in the previous slide that we talked about. So in February, we're looking to do a winter formal or informal. We're thinking that we typically have about 200 kids come to that winter formal dance, which is a pretty low number. And a number of them spend the whole night coming up to Jesse and I talking about, they want to go home. So we need to do something different. So how do we plan something that gets more kids that might not want to go to a dance involved in coming to school and having some fun? So can we create something that, there's a dance somewhere in the building, but there's a whole bunch of other activities going around the school that would be more engaging for some kids who might otherwise not show up to a dance. Mr. Hust and I would love nothing more than to have a video game Mario Kart tournament with some kids for a couple hours at night. So,
which I think is unfair for chaperoning purposes, but okay. But
still have to supervise.
Yeah, our students as well. A lot of our council members are really excited about the idea, but they have heard, kind of some grumbling. So they're going to work on getting some feedback from students where, if we're going to plan something in place of winter formal and then only 20 kids go, that's a big problem. So they want to make sure that it would at least be as well attended and build towards future years, or maybe somehow, we would blend the two where it's still a winter formal, but we still have video games in the gym while there's dancing in the cafeteria. I feel like Andrew just is going to play video games no matter what, so
probably
it doesn't matter what we do. There will be video games happening.
So in March, we'll do the Whitnall Gives Back Week and Mr. Falcon contest that we started last year. That was a really big success. If you didn't go to that Mr. Falcon contest, it was absolutely phenomenal. I loved it, and the kids are already starting to talk about who would be good to participate in that and compete, and some of the ideas behind, possibly some incentives for what teachers could do in that Mr. Falcon contest if we raise enough money. May, we got prom and teacher appreciation, typical things that happen in May. Elections for next school year for student council, and then by June we're hoping to have most of the homecoming planning finalized, which are some typical things that we do.
Yeah,
in the
so
spring.
just some changes as well for elections, now that we have the benefit of Falcon time at the end of the day, talking with
All I did
Why are you touching things?
got it.
Talking with Charlie, it was really our hope that we can get our student council kids in front of the student body, and to make them more present. And so last year, not wanting to call an all-school agenda, we had the kids record speeches. We had links where kids could watch the videos, but we're very aware that it was, still had that element of they weren't really voting based on the speeches. And so we want to get kids who are running for an all-school position in front of the whole school, and we want them to actually have to deliver their message, hoping that also that they are more visible, that when kids see those students walking in the hall, they know that's our council president, that's our council treasurer, and that those are people that they can actually speak with. We always have and I say always, this is only my second year, but last year we talked about how we were going to plan further ahead for homecoming. This year we're really going to plan further ahead for homecoming, because I can't spend more money covering up the grays in my hair. So we're going to be really well planned out, is the hope anyway. And that way we can kind of just jump our freshmen in at the beginning of the year as well, because it's always kind of hard looping them in and saying, we have 5,000 things to do, welcome, let's start doing them right now. And they kind of look at us like, I'm scared, as they should be. So we're hoping to get a lot of those themes and things done by the end of the year, so that the kids can spend the summer planning towards that, rather than wrestling with, should the theme be Paris or something else that gets thrown out there.
Okay, last thing. Some suggestions that we have, and like questions that kind of are guiding us right now. We feel like we absolutely need as much time as possible with student council kids, and if there's a potential to leverage some more 0-hour or Falcon time to make some more contact with those kids, to make sure that we not only have the ability to plan the things that we have on our calendar every year, but like continue to do some things as they're needed with the student body. And then the big thing here this year is the need that we feel a plan with administration and potentially the school board to have that student voice. And some questions around that, about how do our student council students, not us, but our students, engage in hearing and acting on student concerns and feelings. And then how do we build the culture that student council students are active parts of the solutions, rather than just they're a club that exists and things happen, and go to a dance or two, they did it for you. How do we get them to really be active parts of solutions to things here?
Yeah, we've been trying to work with our kids as well on, there are some things where it's not appropriate for kids to be a part of. Like disciplinary issues, no, you don't get to decide, when, this kind of thing happens, or how many tardies until you get a detention or things like that. But the biggest thing that we hear from kids is, well, it doesn't matter what we think. And trying to change some of those things, where maybe if there is room for, negotiation or just change in some things within the school, can they, have a part in that? And even if it's, their idea isn't realistic or something that ends up getting followed through, so that at least they can understand where the final decision came from, and then hopefully pull back a little bit on some of the noise that we tend to hear from kids. Do you guys have any questions for us?
Just one thing I'd like to say is, especially with a lot of the changes we've been having, how this year we have Falcon time, and now we've got changes in the grading system. For me, it's really important to kind of feel like the students are telling us how things are going. Are they making good use of that time? Do they have a better idea of how to use it? Is with the grading changes, does it make sense to them? Where's it coming from? And giving them a chance, because I've heard things both ways, just because I have a child in the high school, and to be able to develop that student council as a way that other students have a place to go where they feel like their voice is being heard, where the representatives can gather the data and bring it up to administration and the board. I would love to hear that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely what we want to really focus on.
And if they have any other great ideas, love to hear them. If something they think is working great or they know about, I would love to hear about it and what their thoughts are.
Yeah, that hits the bottom two bullet points you have listed up there. Finding a way to get that chain of communication from students to student council, from student council, whether it's to Charlie or Dr. Olson or us, whoever it is, making sure there's a cohesive message throughout.
So what kind of training or orientation do student council members get?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. At the beginning of the school year,
Yeah.
sometimes with homecoming, you know, it's trial by fire sometimes, for sure, yeah. The kids who have been engaged in student council for, you know, more than just 1 year, you know, they typically, you know, we sent a couple kids this year over the summer to WASC camp, which is the Wisconsin Association for School Councils. But yeah, a freshman who's coming from, you know, whatever school they might be coming from, yeah, it's we're moving pretty quick right at the beginning of the school year. Yeah, absolutely.
And the stronger that the middle school student council becomes, because they're developing and rolling right along too, that helps feed into the high school structure as well. But still, it's still uncomfortable to be dropped into the high school.
Right, and especially too with kids coming from other schools.
Right.
Yeah, and we've talked about, you know, maybe working more closely. The idea came up of, do you have the freshmen, you know, class selections in 8th grade, but we don't want to exclude kids who aren't necessarily coming from the district anyway. But that's definitely something that we've been trying to encourage with our kids. When we ran haunted hallways, we specifically paired up an upperclassman with an underclassman who had been really involved, and we made the pair of them in charge of their area of the school. So, you know, when the freshmen would say like, but I've never done this, I have no idea, we said that's why you have an upperclassman, and hopefully, you know, to make those older kids like collaborate with someone, trying to pull them in and be that good example. And that's what we told those kids as well, like, you've done this before, teach them what it's about, work with them, get to know them, maybe make a friend.
I think one of the easy ways that we could build in some middle school, high school collaboration is the spring homecoming planning. I mean, that would be an easy kind of low-hanging fruit. And I don't know, I mean, you know, any of you can correct me if you feel otherwise, but I don't know that we would have a kid, you know, an incoming freshman from, say, St. Mary's that would, you know, feel like, you know, the 8th grade student council made decisions about, you know, what theme homecoming was going to be or what the float was going to look like. You know, I feel like that would be a very easy way to start off that kind of collaboration that we really should be having, because we're, you know, right across the street.
The other piece that I'm hearing in this is a need for advocacy. And somehow communicating that to the students through student council of how to advocate for a position and how to respectfully engage in a conversation.
For sure.
Yeah, that's huge.
And that can be difficult.
Yeah, and we had some kids ask us, well, what are we allowed to say if we're upset about things? And it was a good conversation, because we, you know, that's where we could talk to them about how it is okay for you to be unhappy with things. Being in student council or in any leadership position doesn't mean that you're always happy with the way that everything goes. But what it does mean is that you are a positive advocate for things going in the right direction. And it's also going to mean that sometimes if things don't change the way that you wanted them to, you have to respect the decision, and really trying to drive home that piece of being respectful and not just proliferating more anger and more complaining. And that's a lot of, you know, with teenagers, there's a lot of just like, we're going to build on each other's, you know, anger or unhappiness. And if we just sit and dwell in our unhappiness, then we're all unhappy together and it's justified. And so talking to our kids about trying to be, you know, like, look for solutions and not just justification for your unhappiness is something that we've really been trying to work with. In addition to creating those outlets, hopefully having the positive student examples will help, and then the kids who, you know, need a place to go will have that place to go with those positive influences there. Because if we create listening sessions for kids, but it's our student council members who aren't being good examples or who are aiding in some of that anger, then the whole thing's just gonna fall apart.
Yeah, and I can't speak for anyone except myself, but I strongly doubt that anyone on this board would refuse a chance to work with the kids and try to help.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think student council would absolutely welcome it.
Do you have any open meetings right now for the students with the student council, or, so? and
We're
I know
gonna have
you
one on
talked about one a month. You talked
Friday.
about,
Yeah, our first one will be this Friday.
Maybe more of the students might feel like their voice is heard if every meeting was open, not open forum, but as in open for the other students to attend and observe, and at the beginning of each meeting, there's a period of time where they can express their concerns, just a thought.
Sure.
That might get more buy-in through the whole process from the general student body.
It's a good idea.
We'll have to switch venue, but yeah.
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 Any other thoughts or ideas? So I guess ultimately, as you're going through this, let us know what you need.
Yeah.
If you want to come back and present, or whether it's a memo form, or just keep us engaged, let us know what
Yeah.
you need, and we'll.
I think
we'll
having our exec board come back, and they do every month, and present more on this that we just got done talking about, rather than we sold some candy canes to kids right
Yeah.
before winter break. I think it's really the more meaningful discussion that they need to start having with the school board, so.
I agree.
But if you do want
the students come back and talk to us,
Yes.
and you guys make that shift to the background.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
If
thank
you want candy canes, though, they're 3 for $1.
Okay.
You gotta keep the messages appropriate,
That's
though.
the wrong price though, so come see me. So.
Great. Thank you
You guys
both.
married?
Thank you both.
I like to say that he's like the older brother that didn't ask for a younger sibling.
Yeah, I know.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for coming and
Yeah,
presenting tonight and
absolutely.
talking. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you. Okay, moving on to 5, discussion and future action items. A is educator retirement. I is 2018-19 educator retirement benefit. And then I is employee handbook educator retirement benefit language.
Sure, so we'll cover the first one, just each at a time here. So the first one is a recommendation to bring forward the same retirement benefit as last year to those who would be newly eligible to retire as of June 30th, 2019. So just wanted to provide a little bit of the history, as you know, not too far back, but of what has been in place. In 16-17, when I first came on, we put forward a $30,000 HRA benefit to provide to all educators. That was for 16 educators, and they have a letter in their file stating that that is your retirement benefit regardless of when you leave. And so that clearly will stay in place for those 16. Last year, it was a $20,000 HRA benefit provided to all educators who were newly retired, so that particular educator got a letter as well. And then this year, it looks like there would be one more retiree who would fall underneath the stipulations to receive whenever they would retire, the $20,000 HRA benefit if this proposed action is approved December 17th.
Any questions?
Well, we, last year, voted to.
Last year, and I was going to cover that a little bit in the next section, but we can cover that now
Okay.
as well. So last year,
I'm jumping ahead.
Quinn, I'll just jump wherever you
No.
want to jump.
That's all right. No, so these are 2 different issues, right?
Yeah, I think so, but what you're asking is certain, these 2 are certainly intertwined, and thus they're written the way they're written. To cover what occurred last year is we brought forward a 2017-2018 benefit, as well as a 2018-2019 benefit, as well as the idea to eliminate that retiree language from the handbook. So that was all last year. Throughout the discussion from last year, it ended up not being approved, and we ended up only going with the 2017-2018 benefit as it was shown last year.
Okay.
And so essentially this year, I'm bringing forward the same benefit that was brought forward last year at that time.
Okay. So, in the fine writing agenda, after we discuss this, people can talk about it? Anybody from the audience? Am I correct in saying that?
No, I was gonna get to that.
Yeah, we typically, I mean, it says in that they have to be signed in, so no one is signed in to speak. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
There can certainly be discussion next week as well. That is, someone could
And
sign
they're-
it.
just
someone
to be
could
clear
sign
why
it.
they're on there that way, because they are really two separate action items, and so we just wanted to be clear on that, why they're listed that way, but yet, I think as Mike said, they're intertwined. So just wanted to be clear that the board will have to take two separate action items when it comes forward on the 17th.
I think when when this thing was changed about public comment, going from the beginning of the meeting to at the end, and you must sign in and that kind of stuff, there, per each meeting, you can make an exception if there were people, and it wasn't even an exception, it was if they chose that they wanted to speak afterwards, that they can still speak up if they, it was, from the discussion, the intent was, for planning purposes, we know
Sure.
what kind of time and such. That doesn't preclude somebody from,
I mean, the preference would, well, actually it does. I mean, we'd want people to sign in. Now, what we talked about is if we deviated off topic or something else came up in the conversation of it, then it would be different because in this meeting, they speak after the agenda item. But every other meeting, we've followed by people sign in ahead of time, and then they get the chance to speak.
so in our discussion, and this may be a moot point, because I don't know if anybody here was intending to speak, and didn't realize that they had to sign in. But in our discussion, and we could look at the tapes, but it was, because I made a point of it and saying, what if, and it was pointed out that two things. A, if this doesn't work out, we can change it down the road.
Yeah, and it's worked
And I
out.
think we, at some point, need to revisit it, and, because I don't think it has, but, and B, if somebody intended to speak and didn't realize it, that you could entertain, or we could entertain the concept, the idea of letting somebody speak. Now, this may be a moot point if nobody
Okay.
was intending to speak tonight.
Okay. Did you have a comment at all about the agenda item or just that?
That I wanted to hear if anybody was here and wanting to speak, I wanted to hear them.
Okay. Any other comments about the agenda item? Okay, why don't we go on to 2 and then we'll see if there's anything more. Go ahead, Mike.
Sure. So this is a much longer cover letter than typically I would dive into, but I think it's important to kind of lay out some of the situation that, that Whitnall finds itself in comparison maybe with some other districts. So one thing that Whitnall does already, which is of course contribute to the Wisconsin retirement system. And I want to just kind of put those numbers out there about what that budgetary item means to the district. So for Whitnall, almost 1.1 million is budgeted towards retiree pensions already. For teachers alone, that's a little over $750,000. The other 400 some odd dollars for the rest of our staff as well. And just some history and just some logistics of how the WRS works. And the reason I find this important to include in this discussion is that the more and the higher your salary goes, and of course the longer your years are within the system, the higher that benefit is going to be and the more comfortable your retirement is going to be as your salary rises, right? And so with that, Whitnall has put forth a compensation model that really is fairly unique around the area in that we are often asked by area school districts, what's your low and what's your high for your salary? And our low is very high in the area at $43,500. And our high is always fun to report in the last couple of years because it's uncapped. And districts go, what do you mean? What is it is uncapped. You can be at 80,000 and you can continue to do professional development, you can continue to increase your salary, which not only helps you immediately, but it helps you in the future with the WRS system as well. So I wanted to then look at really where some of that compares with some of our area school districts. Thank you. So one thing I wanted to look at is well, those districts in the area that do have a high retiree benefit, and there are. Greenfield offers still a very, what I would consider a very large, November 2014 Whitnall retirement. So does South Milwaukee. And so with that, I wanted to look at, well, what are their salary increases what does their compensation model look like? For Greenfield, for example, their highest increase for an educator in a given year, and that's if they go above and beyond certain criteria, is $1,300. Whitnall had 48 teachers make more than that from 17-18 to 18-19. So a fourth of the staff made more than that in one swipe. There's a trade-off there. South Milwaukee also has a very large retirement benefit, much like what we had in November of 2014. Once you get into a particular lane, because they have lanes in which you are able to move within, the highest an educator can get from year to year is $1,483. We have 37 educators who made more than that in this past year. So every district has to make choices in what they are going to be valuing, whether that is immediate compensation or whether that is compensation off into the future. And this past, what I call in the memo or in the packet is a hiring season, which is usually spring through the summer. Our human resources manager, Karen, did a really fantastic job of we're looking at our hiring processes, and we're looking at who we bring on and how we bring them on. And so she took really detailed notes on what conversations were like with potential hires, and what were their initial questions, what were secondary questions, what drew them to Whitnall, what ultimately got them to be at Whitnall. All of it is immediate compensation. Nobody asks, well, what is the Whitnall retiree benefit like when I retire from Whitnall? It's just not part of what people are thinking about when they are making a switch from a district to a district. And this was a really good year in which to take a look at that, because there was a large amount of educators that we hired, about a little over 30. So we took in those detailed notes. It was mostly compensation. Secondary questions revolved around the compensation model. We had one ask whether there was any sort of 403B matching program. So taking into consideration what drew people here was a big piece into all of this. We also put out more than $50,000 on top of what we negotiated in the summer or in the spring. That was to keep teachers here, whether it was competing offers, whether it was to market demand. It's becoming a more and more mobile environment than ever before. Part of that is because there are districts that don't offer retirement benefits anymore, and you can be more mobile. KM, Greendale, St. Francis, Arrowhead don't offer retiree benefits. So at times there can be some movement, and so we want to respond to that movement and bring teachers in who want to be here and who want to stay here and may have gotten other offers, for example. We're also hiring teachers that are not at the new salary schedule. It is not an automatic, when a teacher leaves, you're coming in at 43.5. That world doesn't really exist as much as it used to. And so before we even implement salaries to teachers that are already here, we are already in the hole. We're already operating in a negative. There is no offset anymore, which used to be the main driver of why retirement benefits could be offered. Well, a teacher leaves, and you're going to bring on a new teacher at 43.5. That's not how it works. And at the same time, we're bringing on experienced staff new to Whitnall, which makes the transition to the rest of the staff easier as well. You're not bringing in new teachers to simply have to learn. That certainly exists. We bring in teachers that are new to the profession at 43.5, but it's not the same pace as it used to be. To even just keep the $20,000 HRA benefit, if it would be a continuous benefit for all 199 or 200 educators, would be a $3.98 million continuous liability. As revenue streams are not what they used to be, we know that this last biennium was considered a very good budget for education. And quite frankly, the idea of getting that same thing again, even with the shift in governorship, it did not come with a shift anywhere else. And so revenues are going to continue to be tight. As we look forward and think about how we want a long-term plan, we're doing that with our hiring process, we're doing that with our buildings and grounds, we're doing with technology plans that we're going to be working on. A year-to-year situation in which it is difficult to go and plan how we want to respond with compensation models, how we may want to do things differently with compensation, whether it be more dollars towards micro-credentials, whatever that may look like, is very difficult to do with the uncertainty of a year-to-year retiree benefit or a continuous liability, even if it is at $20,000 and $4 million of a continuous liability. So all of this goes into the consideration that we think about whether a retiree benefit and any retiree benefit language should be in the handbook.
Thank you, Mike. Any board member comments, questions?
Quick question, just kind of taking a step back, because I'm not part of those constant retirement folks.
Sure.
So the higher the salary, the more you get, and that depends on the highest salary you worked at?
Yeah, it takes whatever 3 years are your highest salary, whether they were anywhere in the system. The 3 highest go into a formula. And that formula, along with years of service, and then what's called a multiplying factor, pushes out a monthly benefit that you get. So the higher your salary goes, the larger that benefit is. You become fully vested, if you will. You become, I don't know, fully vested is the wrong word, but you become, you get what you've put into it at age 57 with, I believe, well, maybe some people out there know better than I do. It's either 25 or 30 years.
You mean you max out your benefit?
30? Thank you.
You max out-
In the memo it says 30, thank you, I looked it up.
You mean you max out your possible?
You don't max it out, you get what you've earned. In fact, your multiplier is now 1.0. Before that, it might be a 0.9 or 0.85 if you leave at 55 or 56. 57 says it's a 1.0. And then as your salary continues to climb over the next however many years, you still get that. Your multiplying factor is a 1.0. WRS considers full retirement age to be 65. Meaning when they run their models about the intention of how much of their income they want you to be able to replace, 65 is where they want to see their goals reached with what they're investing in.
And so, as you say, our portion that we're responsible for is the 50% match. So whatever goes into it, we pay half of it.
Yeah, state law says if someone qualifies for a Wisconsin retirement system and it's based on hours, state law says the district puts in 50 and the employee puts in 50%. There's no deviation from that. It's simply state law.
So that's where the balance has to get struck between higher salaries and then the trailing kind of retirement with it versus doing something separate.
Well, the benefit we're talking about, right, it would be, the benefit we're talking about is on top of WRS, right?
Right.
It's in addition
Right.
to, so the trailing, you'd have to clarify the
But just saying
trailing
that
is-
if we're paying higher salaries,
Yeah,
if that's our goal where we don't cap them,
Yeah,
that instead of doing a payout of 20,000,
right.
theoretically, we've given that 20,000
Correct.
over the
And
years to kind
that's-
of go and pay.
That's kind of the point here, right? Is if we're going to leave salaries uncapped, the idea is you could get a higher benefit because you're going to have higher salaries, and that's the goal. That's the goal.
And not only that, but the higher annual salaries increases the bonus pool available each year.
So what Jonathan means there is, obviously the higher the salaries go, the more money that we put towards market demand or keeping teachers here above and beyond what's negotiated, that increases the pool for the next year for negotiating purposes, right? So if we negotiated this year, and then we also put an additional 50,000 in for market demand, all of that's going into the base salary that gets negotiated the year after, thus increasing the pot each and every year. And especially bringing on teachers that aren't all at 43.5, right? They're coming into the system not at 43.5, but 60 or 70 in some cases. That's increasing the pool more than in the past when it was almost an automatic, we're going to bring on new educators.
So, but what you're asking us to do is to take the wording out of the handbook, because we have to approve the handbook.
Correct. So there's nothing in the handbook that says, here's what the benefit is. According to the handbook, the language needs to be brought to the board each and every year. And so this would essentially eliminate that and thus eliminate the automatic need to bring a benefit forward to the board.
Unless we chose to put it in. In a year that is not.
The
'cause
board
we're
would.
covered, I mean, we agreed that through 18, through 19, we are gonna pay this?
Well, that's what we're voting on,
So-
if we want to offer it for
Previous
18,
item.
19. That was the first item.
That's the first item, okay.
Yep.
I'm just looking, okay. So this one just takes the wording out, and
Starting with next
essential,
year's handbook.
by taking the wording out, it won't automatically come to us.
Correct.
Okay.
So what's the harm in it automatically coming to us? I guess harm's probably the wrong word, but what's the, what's the, I guess, yeah, the consequences of it coming to us versus not coming to us every year
So,
automatically?
yeah. So as we've talked about maybe the last couple of months, we want to do some more with the compensation model. We want to be able to look at whether the dollar amounts that are attached to micro-credentials are appropriate, whether there are different things to do as far as market demand. We don't see that going away. We only see that increasing over time. Those decisions are long-ranging, right? Those have long-ranging consequences. And it makes it very difficult to plan financially for any number of pots in the budget, knowing there's a continuous $4 million liability that is hanging out on your books. How does that play into each and every year? And at some point, you have to determine whether that is going to be something that we continue with or not. And so if we're going to be a district that long-range plans, we need to know whether this benefit is going to be around or not.
So taking it out of the handbook doesn't mean that it wouldn't come up, it just means it doesn't have to come up.
Correct.
Right.
There wouldn't be anything, at this point, there's nothing that's going to go in the handbook that says, and there is no retirement benefit. That's true. But taking it out of the handbook, it would have to be I don't know how unanimous or by a straw vote that you would want to see it again as an action item. And that doesn't change the financial situation that the district is in long-term and how it compares to other districts and how we are choosing immediate compensation versus a retirement benefit from some of our other districts.
I guess my confusion is whether it's in the handbook or not, it could still be brought up and considered. So my confusion is I don't understand how that gives you any more stability in your long-term planning. But my thoughts are if it stays in the handbook, then it may force us, and not that you would need it, but I don't know, let's, I mean, I like the way you think, and you know, you and I've had conversations before as to, you know, the number of variables you're looking at and how you're able to explain stuff, and sometimes you could use a few more colors on your spreadsheets, but you know what I mean. I always mess with that, but know that, but it keeps, I think it keeps, if we have to consider something each year, I think it makes us answer questions. If these questions come up every year, then it makes us think about what we're doing, and
I agree with
may
you in
encourage
that.
us to stay the course, and that's whether you're in the seat or not.
No, I get it. I think you also have to think about the people that it is affecting. It does affect a lot of people. This decision isn't made at random. It has faces behind the decision. And while financially this is very difficult for the district to swallow in long-term plan, it also needs to have long-term planning from the employee as well. And if the employee is waiting every year to go, is this going to be something that the board is going to pass or not, it makes it difficult to long-range plan.
Sure.
Only for the board to say, you know what, this year not, next year yes, this year not. It
It's not
can
just you
cause a
sitting on
lot
the
of
bubble every
confusion.
year, it's with your planning, it's the staff sitting on the bubble every year with, okay?
So if I look at the information you have provided us and everybody's gotten, I think it's a pretty good deal that you have opportunity to make as much money as you possibly can. So what I need from you is to tell us why that's not a good reason. What, you know, why should we offer this benefit? You're the one that's getting it, so I need to hear from you as to why you think this benefit is good for you. Because if I look at what the information is given to me, it's an easy choice. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I think we all need to hear from some folks to make a
Can I say something?
better discussion.
If
I just want to say something short. So
Hold
I
on.
still need-
But no, I think that we need to follow the agenda. This is written out. I don't think we should have exception to it. That could lead us to pieces on the agenda that we can't talk about. So we have to follow the rules.
John's
There
already,
are pieces in place for you to speak.
so John's asked if we would make an exception in this case.
I'm against that. As much as I want to hear him speak, we need to follow the rules. And they're pretty simple. Just sign in before and you can talk.
Yeah, and this isn't something new, this is been established. Any other thoughts or feedback on the agenda item itself?
I have a question for Mike. So can you just, so I'm trying to kind of equate this to like a 401K and a match. So typically, you know, private employers, they'll do a 401K and a match. They don't do a defined benefit program and a 401K and a match. They don't do multiple retirement plans. So I know we match 100% of what the employee puts into the WRS system. Can you give an idea of approximately what that is? And do we fund this on a monthly basis or on an annual basis?
It's on
Like,
a-
what would it be for a teacher?
Well, that's the one.
Understood. So, first of all, it's on a monthly basis
Okay.
that we send it into the Wisconsin retirement system. The law changes every year as to what the contribution rate is.
Okay.
So this past year it is 6.7% for the employee and the employer.
Okay.
And for 2019, it's going down to 6.55%.
Well, even it's over 6%, I mean, that's a very generous contribution. In the 401K world, certainly that is a very generous contribution in the first place.
100% match up to,
Right.
in essence, 6.7%.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
So when a teacher takes part in the WRS, again, familiar with a little bit more of the 401K type of contributions. An employee could pick a level at which they wanted to contribute to the 401K, that I could say I wanted to take $500 or $100 out of every paycheck and have it put in there. So is it a similar structure for the WRS?
So
Or does the employee determine what their contribution is?
state law dictates what the contribution is, so that's for 2018. It has to be 6.7%. You can't do less, you can't do less. Employees have the option to do what are called additional contributions. It could go, what it does is it accrues more money, and it can go into your formula if you wanted to do that. So a WRS has what's called, like I said, additional contributions.
So it's almost a forced savings for retirement. The employee
It's
is
a-
required
it's a
to
way
do
to-
a minimum of 6%.
It's a way to increase your benefit, your monthly benefit at the end. It would be part of the formula. Hey, this person made additional contributions.
Over and above the 6% that they're required. So there's almost a forced savings component to the WRS system as well.
There can be.
Right.
You can also
Plus-
choose to go on a different route, which would be our 403B,
Yeah.
if you wanted to instead.
Not everybody, again, with the systems I'm familiar with.
I can't hear you, Stephanie.
Either you
Sorry.
chose not to fund your retirement account at all, if it's even offered. Because there's several employers that I know in the private sector that don't even offer it. And you pick. So if you only take $100 or $50 or $25 per paycheck, that's all you get. So this way, you have your minimum that you have to contribute. You can opt to do more, and you have some control over your earning potential by increasing your salary. Thus increasing your percentage. Am I, in a nutshell, kind of?
Increasing your, not increasing your percentage, but increasing the contribution,
It's
yes.
a mandatory 6.7%, no matter how much or how little you make, both from the employer contribution and the employee. They don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Once they're eligible by the number of hours they work, it's mandatory reduction.
I can see where, for some, that would be a pretty nice nest egg to have. That they can grow.
Any other questions?
I would just say that, given the rules that we live under right now, we do 2 meetings for a reason, and voting on it on the second one, which means we have emails, use our email addresses, and then look at the instructions at the beginning of an agenda posted from the second meeting of previous months. Because that points out that you sign in at the beginning, before the meeting starts, and the only time you can speak on that is at the beginning of the meeting, not after each agenda item. So if you come to the second meeting of the month and you sign in and then you wait until the agenda item to speak, you've already missed the opportunity to speak on that agenda item because it has to all happen at the beginning. So just review that if you can, if you want to speak at the next one.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. And then again, as we said, this will come up at next week's meeting for action. Okay. So moving on to B, Whitnall High School course proposals, Math 612.
Phone a friend. Good evening. So we are here tonight to talk about course proposals, kind of part 2 here. And tonight we're talking about the math.
Yeah, can you speak up some?
Oh, everyone, yeah, okay, yes.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about course proposals at the high school and as it pertains to our math programming. We, over the course of last year, when we looked extensively at our math programs, when we were doing all of our data digs and looking at kind of our Whitnall landscape, we really uncovered the fact, and it was really no secret, but we focused on the fact that our current proposal, our current progression is not really attending to the needs of our students on several levels. So what we are proposing for your consideration tonight is sort of a reorganization of pretty much the whole thing. And we're really looking at 6-12 math when we talk about this, because we really start this program 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, is really leading more quickly into what used to be the old high school math. Back in 2010, when Common Core state standards came into play, 2009 I guess it was, we never made the move to adhere to what those standards were telling us. And the whole point of Common Core was to up the rigor in mathematics programming. And what Common Core really did was try to shift things back and down a little bit, saying that, you know, we're not really supplying that rigor in the middle school years the way we should. And so Common Core said Algebra 1 really needs to be a component of 8th grade math. And we had been previously offering it at the freshman level, nationally, really. So when Common Core came out, many school districts made that shift, moved Algebra 1 back down into 8th grade, and kind of adjusted everything else accordingly. Whitnall did not do that at that time. So we have been sitting with our Algebra 1 mainly in the freshman year, and then going from there. We also ran into a bit of a strange situation in that our Algebra 2, which there's a lot of hook in Algebra 2 as far as predicting college career readiness, the testing metrics, we really only offered explicitly Algebra 2 in the form of an honors class in freshman year. So if you did not get to honors Algebra 2 as a freshman, you really had no good pathway to try and get to some of those more rigorous high-level math courses as you progress through high school. Took us a little while last year to figure out, in the last couple of years, to figure out why parents were really always concerned about math at the middle school and feeling like their student really needed to be a year ahead of where they actually were. And it was because of that. If you weren't kind of on that accelerated pathway, then you never got your shot at the calculus courses, et cetera, when you got to high school. So we're looking tonight, you have in your packets, you have basically the course progression as it sits, and then the course progression as it's going to move forward. And really what we did was a bunch of different things. It really put a more specificity on all of these courses, really looking at what is the purpose of the course, what is, you know, where does it fit into the entire progression, where are students expected to understand certain components of the math program, where are they tested, where does ACT expect them to be. And because of the way we had this set up, we were always missing the mark on ACT said we need to know this stuff by this time, and we were actually offering content after they were being tested on it. So we reorganized a lot of that stuff to better fit that as well. We really also wanted to look at career pathways, you know, our STEM and engineering and those needs that are going to come forward. Where is the focus there? And looked at what do we maybe need to leave behind because it's a bit outdated, and what do we need to move forward with that more closely aligns with what students are going to need in a post-secondary situation, no matter what that situation is going to be. So we've really tried to create pathways for all students to reach the necessary math levels that they need, whether they are headed for STEM and math-related things post-secondarily, or even if they're not, there wasn't a good option for students who were maybe not necessarily math-bound. They didn't really have a math option of their own. So if you look at the summary of course changes, we put add replace for analytic geometry. This is still a geometry course. We've inserted a little bit more of the rigor into it, and a little bit more attention will be given to the testing that will take place. The whole sequence of Algebra 1 geometry, Algebra 2 is the traditional way of attending to when students are measured on those specific skills. We had been going more of an algebra geometry setup, so we had kind of not had those things in exactly the right place. So we've realigned those two. So we put geometry in between the two algebras. Pre-calculus was a big thing. We took pre-calculus, which was a one-year course. I'm sorry, yeah.
That's probably a better visual.
There we go, yes.
Go just up,
One
down
more,
a little bit more.
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah. So we just had a straight up pre-calculus, and what happened in that one-year course, and Erin, you can correct me if I'm misspeaking here, but it took pre-calculus for a full year. Students would take it for a full year, but a lot of what they needed in the middle of the year was not offered till the end. So we've actually split pre-calculus into 2 half-credit courses and loaded the data and analysis pieces that they need into that first semester, so that more closely aligns with what they're able to pursue after that, then they have an option. So there's also a pre-calculus 2, which is sort of a stats and trig focus. But that allows students to say, I'm taking pre-calculus 1, taking that half credit, and then I've got some options that go after. When you look at the way that those are lined up on the screen, most students will kind of follow that middle pathway that starts with analytic geometry. But this is with the assumption that Algebra 1 is going to be covered in 8th grade now. So they're coming into analytic geometry in 9th grade, Algebra 2, pre-calculus 1 for that one semester, and then they've got the options of jumping into the pre-calculus 2 or whatever other options are there. The top track, we still maintained a top track that is for those students that are really going to be aggressively going down the math pathway, and they're looking to kind of jump into that more advanced coursework early on. So we do have the Algebra 2 and then jumping into pre-calculus 1, 2, and the APs, et cetera. We also have put in some math extensions. So you see the little dotted line bubbles there. Math extensions are going to be half credits. They're not actually going to be counting toward math graduation credits, but they will count toward elective credits. But these are going to allow students to just take a half credit where they'll still get credit, but it'll give them support in whatever course that they are currently enrolled in math. So if I'm in a geometry class and I am really not digging the geometry right now and I'm really struggling, I could also sign up for a half credit of math extension, which just give me another course in which I could really dive deeper, and a teacher will help me kind of strengthen my foundations in that particular course. So again, those would not be counted as math credit. That would just be elective credit. We also have that lower track for the students that are going to approach math differently. It might be a struggle situation. It might be that the foundations were not there in 8th grade, so we did offer another Algebra 1. This will be high school Algebra 1 to complete that Algebra 1 requirement if necessary. And then we have a new thing. This is offered on both the science end and the math end, and it went through approval with the board with the science courses. And it's going to be an integrated math, chemistry, physics course. So you're going to take all of those three things and kind of do an integrated approach to the sciences. A big problem with science and math is if you don't get the alignments properly, if you get your math after you needed it in this particular science course, you're kind of set up badly for the science course or vice versa. So that will hopefully help some students really take a different approach and use that integrated way of going into things. We have more electives that are now going to be offered. We've got the intro to stat, intro to calc. One of the things that we were hearing from teachers as we were talking through some of this stuff is that students were often jumping into AP calculus, A, B, or B, C, without the foundations that they actually needed. So some of these will actually give them a better setup to engage in some of that coursework. How am I doing?
What is the difference between intro to calc and what you're learning in pre-calculus?
And you are?
Hi. I'm Aaron Bienick. I taught at the high school for 15 years. I've been at the elementary level for the last 5 years. I work as an elementary math coach and K-12 math content specialist.
And hold a national board license in mathematics.
Correct.
So.
So you don't like math?
I love it. I love it. Kevin, your question. I'm trying to think, because I'm thinking this way and I'm looking at something else. Mm-hmm. So can I just think for a second? Sure. About that?
Was he your teacher, Kevin?
The intro to calc, I think the intro to calc, we were really looking at, those are students that might want to explore calculus without taking the full year kind of thing, so they just want to get their feet wet with the calculus.
So would you go then, instead of taking pre-calc 1, intro to calculus, if you're going pre-calc, you're doing pre-calc 1, pre-calc 2, but if you're thinking about calculus, you might take another elective, then take an intro to calculus to see if that's what you want to do.
Correct, yeah. So we're just trying to give as many options as possible, because we attended to the student that was either kind of very advanced or the student that really needed the support, so we want some flexibility in between those two.
And then regarding the top track there, so is geometry more or less, I don't want to call it a filler, but since it's not in that track as it is in the other ones as a first year thing, is it just not something that
So that top level are the students that, if they're in Algebra 2 as ninth
Yeah,
grade, those are the
already have
students
it.
that would have gotten the geometry in 8th grade.
So that's, okay, that's, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yeah,
Step-
they're the ones that are jumping a year
Gotcha.
ahead.
Thank you.
And there's some doing that now.
So I actually have two questions. So when you're talking about the algebra and geometry in the middle school, at what point decisionally do kids or parents need to be engaged to get their kids enrolled with that? Like, does it have to be all the way still at the elementary level like it has been in the past? Is this something that there's the flexibility to say, you know what, my kid's really bored in math, they need more of a challenge, how can I move them along? Is that flexibility there?
Yes, yeah, and that flexibility has always been there. I would say that it's just not, it's been sort of whack-a-mole and piecemeal and reactionary. So now that we have a better, just predictable program in place, I think those conversations are gonna be easier to have. And we always want to say that if somebody feels like they need to be pushed or challenged, and our middle school teachers have been really great about, yeah, this is not appropriate, we are gonna do some curriculum compacting, or we're going to advance them a year, or we're going to, so we do have those options always, yeah.
So then my other question is, I like the flexibility of the program, but one of the concerns I have is, are we gonna end up with classes with 1 or 2 students in them, or?
Yeah, and one thing that I should mention is that we are not going to have all of this just boom happen all at once. This is really designed with the class of 2023 in mind, so this year's 8th graders. So anybody that's sitting at 10th grade or 11th grade right now, they're gonna follow through with what they've already started and finish that out. So this will roll up with that 8th grade class. So there's gonna be some things that you see on here that won't be offered right away. So it's just gonna come up with the 8th grade class. To your point, to your question of will we have classes of 1 or 2, I don't know. It seems like we're trying to fill a need at that point. We do have like the math extensions piece, and we have some flexibility that we would say that maybe we temporarily don't run a course that would only have 1 or 2 students, but we've got plenty of other options to consider if that happens.
I would say that we actually don't have any more classes. We have semester classes. We have semester classes which are different than the year-long ones. So right now, because we have, for example, honors geometry and geometry, that's only going down to that. And because everything is sort of this diagonal track, so when sophomores are in something, and kids who are accelerated as a sophomore is the same class that juniors are taking. Those students can be in the same class, and we don't have that now. So this actually, as we were talking with the math department chair from the high school, reduces the number of sections, because high school scheduling is always challenging too, and we don't want to make some decisions that are going to, inadvertently create some more challenges at the high school schedule. So this actually, by having that, accelerating the pace of things and instead of creating always these honor sections of everything along the way. And so it looks like there's more math classes because there's semester options now as compared to year-long options. So when you look at that, it actually creates more of a mix and match and multiple grades rather than just all at one level, which hopefully actually alleviates some of the high school scheduling options. So it's a good observation, but that was taken into consideration because of that, yeah.
We added a quantitative reasoning class as well. You want to talk a little about that, because that was kind of you and Blake.
Yeah, so, I mean, the quantitative reasoning course, that elective course, is meant for folks that may not be pursuing anything to do with math when they get to college. So how do we offer something for those kiddos that want to pursue another semester of mathematics, but something that's not going to be so specialized that they won't apply when they get to college?
Logic and reasoning. And so I think Lynn started out by saying that she and I met for a couple hours last week with folks from the technical college, and they're sort of following this same pathway, which is funny because we had met the day before with the math folks, and it was almost the same parallel conversation that we have, is that we're in such a hurry to push every advanced student into calculus, and very few students in terms of majors and careers need that level of advanced calculus. More majors, business majors, medical field, actually need the advanced statistics than they do the calculus. And so we have to be a little bit more intentional, instead of assuming that every single kid is trying to get to at least Calc BC or something. That may or may not be for every student. But there's a lot of other math out there that is post-secondary, rigorous, but it's just not at that calculus level. And it's funny because the technical college and some of our four-year universities are also realizing that. And we also talked about that some of them, if our students are really accelerated, some of our universities do not want them to take, for example, a Calculus 3 in high school because they want that's a 300 level class for some of them, and they want them to take those 300 and 400 level classes at the university from which they get their degree. So there's a nice balance. At that point, AP statistics is one that we should also really be pushing, because that's the math, the higher level math that a lot of other majors need more than specifically engineering. And so I think that was very intentional in terms of our physics course that we switched over to in terms of AP physics.
So are we going to have so Stephen already asked about the ability for a student to essentially jump tracks from one to the other. I think that's kind of for the flexibility for a student to, if they change interest, I think I do want to get into engineering, so and maybe they're showing the ability to be able to keep up and be able to jump tracks. But what about, Lisa talked about reducing number of sections. We might have that ability to do that. What about class size concerns? Do we have any ability to deal with if the class size, this results in a particular class size enlargement that might be less desirable?
I feel like, it's okay, right? I feel like reducing the number of sections and sort of rigmarole gives you a little bit more flexibility, because right now you're trying to schedule this particular honors class at this time and this class at this time, and then you're kind of pigeonholing kids, and so you're stuck with those particular numbers. If we have less sections, then we're a little more, I feel like it's more flexible in terms of how many kids we can put in a section.
I don't understand, forgive me, but I don't really understand how our flexibility would increase by having, maybe our ability to schedule the day would increase, but I don't see how that, I don't see how it could affect student numbers or give students more flexibility in their day.
So one of the things, for example, right now, John, like there's only 1 or 2 sections of honors geometry, and so we don't have enough to more equitably distribute. So obviously the more sections, of course, we can more equitably distribute and have more options for kids within their schedule. And because we have all of these singleton sections of math across the board, this creates fewer courses, because we're just trying to, in which grade in which they take them. And so it creates more sections of which we can more equitably distribute students, instead of saying we can only run 1 honors geometry this year because that's a unique specialty class. And if there's 29 kids, well, there's 29 kids because we can't split it. So now by having an analytics geometry in which we have 8th graders, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, there are going to be more sections of that. And we can look at the number balancing in terms of the number of sections that we offer throughout the day and try to balance, like if we had a section, we could try to balance that based on the schedule.
So in some sense, though, the section number should be driven by really a maximum desired size, and the number of students that are falling into that class or that track.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to adjust to what the student needs, not adjust the student to what our schedule.
Right. This will give us more
Wow.
more opportunity to do exactly that. Right now we have less flexibility. In fact, so this will give us more of that, which is good.
And that was a lot of the thinking with the semesters versus all these year-long classes, being able to move that around a bit more. The other thing with this is that we are currently in our third year of CMP, I believe.
Yes.
Third year of CMP at the middle school.
Can you
And
say what
the
that means?
Connected Math Project, yep.
Thanks.
So Connected Math Project came out of Michigan State, and we've talked a bit about that roll up with the curriculum, and Aaron helped them implement that. 8th grade is fully into it this year, and that is tied to Common Core. So Common Core state standards have been embedded in those curricular resources all the way up, and that is this is the first time we're seeing the Algebra 1 starting to unfold in the 8th grade. So the other thing that we had to do is really be deliberate about, we really kind of fast-tracked those students. So now what we have going on at the middle school, the teachers are doing a fantastic job along with their math coach and with Aaron, really working to supply some extra supports for those students. If it was going at a quicker pace than they were used to, we now have, we keep calling it a double dip just for lack of a different name. But we have a second math class in the connect time at the middle school for students that need support. And they've done a really nice job of just getting that extra math time built into the day to make sure that they are, in fact, really getting through that Algebra 1 stuff and are as prepared as they can be for the Algebra 2 thing now hitting the high school.
So in effect, you're putting a math extension in their
At the middle school,
schedule.
yes, exactly, yep. And
And
that's
I-
where this came from, yeah.
And I think Lynn said it, the double thing that happened is, remember Bridges, which happened
Yep.
before? So that happened at our elementary school, and what we saw last year was probably the perfect storm. The students who had had Bridges for a couple of years came into 6th grade, and I don't think the middle school was quite ready for what the 5th grade was, because they had sort of amped up their math for several years. And so all of a sudden, they were in 6th grade, and we're like, oh, and we didn't have quite that acceleration planned in 7th and 8th grade. So we sort of had this perfect storm in middle school last year. This resolves this and now sort of creates a K-12, if you will, continuum, because we had been sort of pushing that rigor down in our elementary schools, and we're not quite prepared last year for what that meant. And
We're
so
seeing the
that's
payoff and we're not ready for it.
correct. That was it. The middle school was like, whoa, what's happening? They're coming to us in a different place, and we hadn't put a system in place. And so this really sort of resolves that. And that's why, if you remember, there were some parents last year who were talking about, they felt that their child wasn't being challenged enough. I think, Stephen, to your question, this addresses that. And at the same time, we're putting supports in place for kids who, we don't want to like just leave students behind in all of that. And so both at the high school and the middle school, that's why you'll see some of those extra supports being in place to make sure that nobody falls through and all of that. But it does basically push that rigor and continue it from where it started in the elementary school.
So a side note from that is Bridges is evidently producing the way we had hoped
Can I talk a little about
versus the everyday Chicago, whatever you want to call it, math
Yes, very much
fiasco.
so.
Okay,
Very much
thanks.
so, yeah.
I guess on the flip side, let's say you've got somebody who just loves the idea of engineering or architecture, wants to do that, but doesn't really have the skill set for it. Is there a path through this curriculum that would help that individual?
Well, and that's where we're hoping that either through the math extensions, where if you're taking a specific math course, you can take that and just get your, your support and your double dip there, or that integrated chemistry, math, physics thing, it's on, I don't want us to be thinking totally in tracks, because that's just going to be really a different approach. That's going to be
Okay.
taking your maths and your sciences and really putting them together and having them work in tandem in a more seamless fashion, which is actually how the real world kind of works. So that would be a way to address that.
I mean, it is more how the real world works, but it's not necessarily how you go through real college. So it's still gonna.
It depends, yeah, it depends on which way you're gonna go in college, for sure.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you both, and we'll see it next week as a action item.
I didn't see on here, and I keep looking, but I didn't see on here that class you just mentioned. I see it in the table, but I don't see it in the description. You've got the integrated physics, chem, math 1.
That
and
was
math
in the
2.
science one that we had.
That was approved with the science package.
Yep,
Okay.
that's in the science curriculum.
I understand that. I just thought I would also see it in this summary of course proposal changes. Okay, thanks.
And I just wanted to thank Lynn and Aaron and Janelle Zwick and Blake Burgess and Nancy Zarno who worked on this. Like, this was a major, this wasn't just a couple courses that came forward. This was a major program overhaul and really thinking about math differently. And so just want to thank them for the work that they put into that in terms of looking at what that was. And even the high school math teachers who are actually very excited about this and have been really looking forward to being able to address things and have some things in place like interventions for kids and yet accelerating those who are there. So I think it's a very comprehensive approach, not just sort of a Band-Aid approach to some things that we've been doing. And that's why it was a huge work to get it to this point to what you see in front of you. It may not look like it, but there was a lot of behind the scenes talking and data analysis and a lot of that went into that. So I'd like to thank them because there's a lot of work that went into that.
And that description is there. I don't know how I didn't see it before. Page 15.
Yeah, for both those classes.
I expected to see it in the table, and that's why I didn't see it down there.
Oh,
Sorry
yeah,
about
I
that.
just didn't put it in there just because it had already gone through with
Yep,
the
yep,
science, yeah.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay. C is Whitnall High School course fee proposal.
Yeah, so this is a little different for Whitnall School District. So, Charlie, yeah, you can certainly come up if there are questions. Do you mind if I just?
Yeah, go for it. You like money, I know.
Charlie brought up the fact that we have a course in which it's called Outdoor Pursuits, which there are multiple field trips throughout the year. Those field trips add up to $60 over the course of the semester.
Roughly, yeah, yep.
So what we'd like to do is, instead of having it be a collection process with each field trip that comes up, always with the wondering, especially with our students who may be free and reduced, in which teachers really are not supposed to know if they are free and reduced, and thus may not be subject to even not having that paid for because it's a field trip or additional. These field trips are so integral into the actual course that making it a course fee would allow for, first of all, a one-time collection through our course registration, as well as allowing for students who are free and reduced to forego that fee as well. We made the fee, instead of the $60, we made it $50 to forego anything in which, well, my student missed a field trip, I should really get reimbursed some of those dollars. That this is just a one-time $50 fee, even though the value of the field trips is greater than that. And so we tried to just, in this proposal, introduce a course fee, which we really don't have across the district. We have our registration fees, which cover consumable supplies throughout the district, but this is specific for this class and really would be kind of a first, maybe last, I don't know, depends, course fee in outdoor pursuits.
So in this class, is there a provision for if a student can't make it to a field trip?
Yeah, the teacher does offer makeup credit if they aren't able to participate in something, but some of the things like scuba diving, they, in our pool, bring an underwater connection in, and we get a discount because they already use our pool for other pieces. But the equipment rental for that is a fee that we just can't sustain on our own,
Right.
part of without a course fee. And so if a student cannot participate, is unable to participate in that unit, there's always a makeup unit for something else.
So for now, is it a pay to play? So if you can't make it to that field trip, you don't have to pay for that field trip?
Correct.
And how this would change it for is basically every student's paying whether they can make it to everything or not.
Correct, and that's why we chose the $50 over the $60, because something happens, you're not able to make it. Yes, that that $5, $10 or whatever it would have been for your potential field trip admission fee or whatever the case may be.
Well, we already had cost in place.
I'm sorry?
We already had the cost in place.
Correct.
No matter if 5 kids show up or 25.
Correct.
Still costing us that.
Correct. It's like the snow tubing, if we have snow when they go out to it. We're already paying for the bus, we're already paying for the chaperones to go there.
Yep.
But the students, when they get there, they have to turn their $5 over to rent their snow tube.
But for example, in the scuba diving thing where they come to us, there's no equipment rental for a student that's not there, so we're not necessarily paying the same amount regardless of the number of students that show.
Correct, but we have to have all that information to
Right.
Underwater Connection prior to them showing up. And just, last year we faced a couple students who could not come up with the money, and after learning that they did qualify for a free reduced lunch, I was able to waive the fees for them, but that took a little bit of rigmarole with having the teacher then know probably more information that they needed
It's really
to know.
against protocol.
Mhm.
It's really against.
And in some cases, this class is avoided.
Correct.
Because of those extra field trips, that there are some students that would love to try this, but won't take it. On the flip side, though, it's outdoor pursuits, and in the winter time, a lot of the curriculum is built around snow. So if we don't have snow, it's not because the the student can't go on the field trip, it's because the field trip can't happen. So then what? Are we in a position of collecting course fees that we're never going to spend the money on that particular student because there's no snow?
So the conversations the teacher and I have had revolve around having a multitude of different options of outdoor activities. And we're fortunate that we've got snowshoes and cross-country skis that we already own so that the students can use those if we do have snow. However, if we don't have snow, there's plenty of other equipment that they can do outside still without the use of our Mother Nature cooperating. But we have had the conversation in years past. We've rented bicycles for the students come springtime when the weather does get nice, and having that conversation of renting bicycles again if they're unable to do the snow tubing or other activities.
So it's not going to be an unearned fee?
Correct.
That there's going to be something in place that if they can't go out during
Correct.
the snow, when the weather warms
Yeah.
up, they'll do something else that may not have been scheduled to take the place of the snow activity.
Correct. And correct me if I'm wrong, but course fees need to apply directly to the student for something. It can't just offset towels or water bottles or something like that that we use for FIAD in general.
Right. So like the equipment rental for the student.
Correct.
And can they be grouped, so like it ends up being equipment rental for that outing?
Correct.
Regardless of which students go?
Correct.
Who teaches it now?
Ms. Mulligan.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so this will come back next week for a vote as well.
Thanks, Charlie.
Okay, on to D, revised policy 9700.01, first reading. Again, this is going back to the sponsorship conversation. They've revised the advertising commercial activities policy to include sponsorship information. Does anyone have any questions on that? It's pretty straightforward. Okay.
I did have a question.
Okay.
The word donated is in there in the first paragraph. Is that accurate? In return for the sponsor receiving and acknowledged
When
and/or
it's-
goods were donated. I mean,
When it's in the scope of sponsorship, I think so, John, but I mean, you're not really,
you're expecting to get something for their contribution, so is that actually a donation?
is it a fine line between they're expecting to get something or we're willing to give something for your donation?
Well, this is about sponsorship, which means
Right,
that they
so-
contribute something and we give them something back.
So,
We would treat it we would allow the corporation to treat it as a donation. That's usually a question that occurs. Is this a donation? Yes, you are making a donation. In return for your donation, we will provide you some sponsorship, some reciprocal reciprocation.
So in that case, it gives them a tax incentive.
Tax incentive avenue
And
in
is
which
that-
to have some advertising at our school.
Because our language here says donation, I wonder if that's accurate and with the intent of
I
donation.
can check in on this, absolutely.
well,
I
didn't
don't
this-
disagree with the question, I don't disagree with the integrity of what we want to make sure we're doing here.
Well, let me just clarify. This language is what's provided by Neola or what other
No,
districts have used,
this is from some school districts who have, yeah, I did not write it,
That's
I
Jesse.
stole it, I totally stole it, go
It
ahead.
came directly from, two school districts have separate sponsorship policies, and they're both Neola school districts.
Mhm.
So it is part of their Neola policies, and they have sponsorship policies. So we took language out of those sponsorship policies and embedded it into our advertising policy.
But to be clear, verbatim, except for the very first line, and the very last line, in which we just wanted to reference the material below. I don't know if Neola drafted this.
No, they worked with those
They
school
worked
districts
with the school district to
draft
draft it. It's not a
Right.
it's not a prescribed,
But ultimately Neola would have to approve it because they're going to support it.
they could say, they could help draft and say, but we're not gonna support it. We wouldn't legally support it.
Okay.
I just wonder if that falls within their area of expertise as far as tax language and liability and benefit goes.
Yeah, I think that does. I think what they shared with us in terms of Neola is they felt, their legal counsel felt that the broader sense that sponsorship was technically covered by the previous language. However, if within your district you're going to differentiate between sponsorship and advertising, that was where the clarity is, and I think that's why we decided, because we are differentiating in how that gets treated. And so did several other districts that looked at. They wanted that, and so if we're gonna start creating the differentiation, are you advertising, sponsoring, or donating? And so in terms of this was having some definitions in terms of this. So if this can be cleaned up, it absolutely can. And that's why legal counsel will always tell you to go simpler in board policy rather than more complicated. That's why Neola themselves said we didn't create sponsorship in terms of that because we believe that advertising is a bigger umbrella and covers that. Those districts like, I think we shared with you McGuanago's book last time that has an actual, that a whole, because they wanted the definition of sponsorship to be different than advertising because they have different protocols and forms and things that are allowed for those. They've separated them, and we were going down that also.
Which is the vision that Dave has kind of set out.
Correct.
To be different.
But here we tie the definition of advertising into a donate and reciprocate type of a thing, which, I don't know, I just, to me, it just seems a little unclean.
Any other? Okay, then again, this will come back next week for.
I'll just kind of see how it can be maybe tied in a little differently, a little cleaner if need be.
I just feel like it's almost like we're redefining some terms to make them what we'd like them to make or something. I'm just concerned about that. I already expressed it. So.
Yep, thank you. All right, moving on to E2019-20 calendar.
So you see a draft calendar in there. We typically have been bringing it at least since I've been here in December so we can get it out to our families. You'll notice in the cover sheet that we are doing way more collaboration in developing a school calendar with other school districts than ever before. One of the southeastern Wisconsin school districts actually put out some guidelines. There are more districts that are jumping on board with that consistent spring break week. So that's really good as we move forward. So this school calendar, we have a district building leadership committee of representatives from each of the schools that I meet with. And this was given to them to get feedback from staff members. We generated a Q&A document. There were very few questions this year. I think a lot of them last year were answered because there is not much that changes in this school calendar as compared to last year. It's almost an exact repeat when you look at the number of days and where they fall. Other than the winter holiday, again, we can't control when those holidays are when we come back. The one change, and I did notice in there, is that we noticed at the end of October this year that our staff were really at a place that could have used a breather. And so in order for us to do two things, to give our staff a day off, and it worked well just because of how the holidays fell, and that Greenfield School District, one is that we collaborate with staff development days. They also do that. They have a PD day on that Thursday at the end of October, and then a day off for everybody on Friday. So that is a change you will see in this calendar. I think the committee, when I shared it with those educators, liked that. I'm having that like complete day off for everybody. So that's one change in here. The other changes with those floating PD hours, right now it was an option for staff that half day before Thanksgiving and the half day at the end of the year. The majority of staff chose to take some hours, some PD hours so they could have those days off. Next year, we're gonna have all staff select from those hours to do that, as many districts do. It made it pretty challenging if we're trying to have our teachers collaborate with each other, that those who chose not to had to show up that day. Lynn had some great conversation with them on that half day before Thanksgiving, but in terms of we're really trying to encourage that to happen. So that's all we did, is saying that's not really an option, even though the majority of our staff are already doing that. Those, I would say, are really the significant changes. I would say the questions from staff, I think there were 4 of them that the committee members submitted from their staff that they collected. There was some concern, I think 2 of the 4 were related to the kindergarten transition day, in terms of it was new for them. I think, talking with the principals and moving forward, I think parents overwhelmingly said it was a positive experience to have that. And then just it was mostly the schedules from there. So I think that there was not the questions like we had last year about the spring break week because of that, but that's going to sort of a consistent spring break in the region. So I did share with them the number of school districts that are doing that, and I think it's helpful in the area. And those who aren't are looking at it for the following year. Some of them had already planned out, but so.
Lisa, is there a reason why no one attached dates to conferences?
Yeah.
The concern being that if parents are using this to plan ahead and you're looking at some vacations, then they don't want to miss conferences.
Yeah, so those are school days right now, and so the plans are to work with, we had a good conversation with both the district building leadership team committee and administrators about possibly doing the conferences maybe a little bit different, and maybe not all schools in the same week. So if you're a parent that has a family that has kids in all 3 levels, that's consuming a lot of evenings all in the same week, which is very challenging to do. And there's nothing that says they all have to be in that same week. So we want to use our teachers to get some input on how they might think of doing it, how they might do conferences differently, or when they might do them. So the plans